Ayan, hindi na ako magulong mag-trade, hindi na magulong magpaliwanag kasi meron kanina, pasensya na, mga open position tayo. Kasi sabi ko ang hirap habang nagtitrade ka tapos nagre-record ka nitong feed. So ngayon, sinarato ko na dahil holiday naman ng US. Okay na ako doon sa kapiranggot na yon. Hinita ako, kaya makapag-focus na ako. Pasensya na ulit sa nakaraang video. Okay, ito na. Monetary policy and fiscal policy. Ano yun? Yung monetary policy na discuss natin yan eh. Pag sinabi natin monetary policy in layman's, polisiya ng central bank yan. Ang fiscal policy, polisiya yan ng government. So, ano yun? Ano yung mga yun? Anong kinalaman nun sa currency o sa paggalaw ng market? Okay, first, revisited. Kaya revisited kasi na-discuss na natin to. Monetary policy is typically implemented by a central bank, primarily concerned with the management of interest rates and the total supply of money in circulation. Now, fiscal policy is the action carried out by the government by changing either taxing or spending, involves in shift in the government budget position. Okay, yung itong monetary policy daw is typically implemented, sabi ko nga, ng central bank. Ang primarily niyan is to influence the amount of money in circulation, typically the supply of the money in circulation. Rather, hihigpitan ba nila o luluwagan nila yung amount of money na nasa sirkulasyon. Fiscal policy, however, is the action covered now by the government by changing either taxing or spending. At yan, dalawang polisiya na yan that will affect both the supply and demand. And that will affect both the spending, and those policy both both have an effect doon sa expansion at contraction ng economy. Okay, muna tayo sa monetary policy para walang away. Monetary policy is defined as the action of a central banks that intended to influence the demand and change of economic condition. Ulitin ko ulit, nabubulol ako. Okay, monetary policy is defined as the action of the central bank that are intended to influence the demand and change in economic condition by directly influencing the money supply. So may mga tinatawag tayong MO, M2, M3. Hindi ko na gano'y di-discuss yan. Although mahalaga rin naman siya, pero hindi siya tradable para sa akin. So, yung MO are also called the narrow money. Yung M2 indicates the short-term time. Pero let's not focus na dyan. Kasi although mahalagang context siya, pero hindi ko siya nakikitang tradable. Kahit kasi although sinasabi ng leading yan, pero magre-reflect na yan doon sa mga ibang economic data at magiging concern na yan forever. Okay, sumunod natin yung this affects monetary policy. This affects interest rates and the money invested by firms, because investment spending usually fueled by refinancing of business operations through debt. Naipaliwanag ko na yan doon sa monetary policy. When interest rates are high, the cost of debt repayment is getting also high, and that will inhibit or that will discourage the business to acquire new or more debt. Inversely, when the interest rates are low, that is inviting the investors or the businesses to borrow more money. And at doon sa pagbabaro ng money na yon, napupush natin ang economy into expansion. Okay, bakit Bakit? Kasi because investment spending is component of aggregate demand, changing the money supply through changing interest rates can directly affect the rate of borrowing, making it either cheap to stimulate the economy or expensive if they want to restrict economic growth or close any GDP gaps when they do exist. So yung monetary policy, kahit ano pang sabihin ng central bank niyan, et cetera, marami kasing laman niya yan, no? The only one goal is to influence the interest rate to restricting the money supply. Okay, mali pala. To influence the money available in circulation by changing the interest rates. If they want to inject more money in circulation and invite borrowing or acquiring debt, they will simply lower the interest rate. And if they want to get the money out from circulation, get some of the money out from circulation, they can they can use the monetary policy by influencing that by increasing the interest rate. Yun lang yun. The use of monetary policy is necessary when the economy is experiencing excessive inflation or economic contraction, and when the market fails to correct itself. Without intervention, the economy will suffer to a bubble. Paano nangyari yon? Ngayon, pag nakikita ng central bank is yung market assets or stocks, real estate, at anumang assets sa market is overvalued na. Above na siya sa kanyang intrinsic value, way above its intrinsic value. Delikado kasi yun because that creates inflation. At pushing the price above, way above its fair value, it makes it a bubble. Kasi mas delikado pag nag-burst yan, magkakaroon ng talagang crash sa market. So ang ginagawa ng central bank, nag-step in yan. If the inflation is too high, equals, no, that will translate that if the economy is expanding at a rate or level na hindi na sustainable, the central bank will step in through its monetary policy to influence the amount of money in circulation. Anong ginagawa niya? Kasi si stock market, kahit naman sabi mo, oy, magko-correct, isipin mo sa stocks, kahit nga sabi mo overvalue, yung mga retail trader, ibabash ka pa nga nila KJ ka daw. Na ngayon, when the market failed to correct itself, the central bank will intervene. No? They will either step up, increase interest rate, and that will have a negative effect on the stock market and other market also. So, ibig sabihin nun, tinatabasan nila yung inflation dahil tinatabasan nila yung inflation kasi tinatabasan nila yung demand. With that being said, without intervention, the economy will suffer in a bubble. Mas delikado pag hindi sila nag-intervene. Next, there are two types of monetary policy, expansionary and contractionary. Expansionary increases money supply, which makes borrowing cheaper in order to stimulate spending, thus encouraging employment, private sector borrowing, and consumer spending. Ngayon, yung expansionary policy, ito yung policy ng central bank. Simply, they lower the interest rate and increase the money supply available. Ngayon, dahil mas marami ang perang nagsisirculate sa economy, mas cheap ang cost of borrowing, mababa ang interest rate, at nag-stimulate yun ng spending. Dahil nga mababa ang interest rate, ba't hindi ka mangutang? Ang baba lang ng debt repayment. Diba? At dahil nangungutang yung mga tao, tumataas ang spending, that is encouraging employment because business will hire people to meet the demand. At yung private sector, at yung mga consumer spending. Pero inversely, when the economy is getting too hot, masyado na mainit at unsustainable na yan sa tingin ng central bank, the central bank will use its contractionary monetary policy. It slows the rate of growth in the money supply in order to control inflation, and it slows economic growth, decrease employment, and make borrowing expensive. Ngayon, dahil nga naipaliwanag ko sa inyo na ang economic expansion, kakambal niya ng inflation at paglobo ng utang, i-restrict na yan ng central bank before getting out of hand yung growth. Kasi yung growth hindi na tugma sa sustainable level at nag-create na ng bubble sa economy. Ang gagawin ng central bank dyan, it will step up. Tataasan nila ang cost of repayment. of debt repayment. Ngayon naman, dahil mataas ng interest, hindi ka na mangungutang. Magbabayad ka ngayon ng utang mo. Diba? Hindi ka na uli mangungutang yan, and that will restrict economic growth kasi bakit? Para maabot uli yung optimal level ng economy. Kasi one of the mandate of the central bank is to keep the level of inflation at a healthy level at to keep the economy at optimum performance o optimal level. Hindi masyadong mataas, hindi masyadong overvalue, at hindi naman masyadong deflationary o masyadong mababa. Doon sila sa optimal level. Kaya ginagamit yung expansionary at contractionary tools as a part of monetary policy ng central bank. Naintindihan ba? Naintindihan, no? Ngayon, punta tayo sa fiscal policy. Fiscal policy is the means by which a government adjusts its spending level and tax rate to monitor and influence the nation's economy by changing government spending and tax policies to influence macroeconomic condition, including the demand, employment, inflation, and economic growth. Ngayon, kung yung itong monetary policy is influencing by increasing and decreasing the interest rates or simply taking out or injecting the money into the economy, ito naman fiscal policy ay ginagamit siya ng pamahalaan o ng gobyerno para i-adjust yung spending niya. Natatandaan natin, one of the key components of GDP is investment spending. Tatandaan natin, no? And yung spending, one of the key components niya, pati yung consumer spending. Ngayon, pag binago ng gobyerno yung kanyang spending and tax rate to monitor and influence, no, a nation's economy, ang gagawin ng gobyerno dyan is it's either tataasan niyang buwis o babawasan niyang buwis. It's either mag-i-spend siya sa infrastructure o magkakaroon ng fiscal cliff o budget cut. It's either mag-i-spend ng gobyerno o budget cut ang gagawin ng gobyerno. Sumunod, it is based on the theory that aside from the central bank with its monetary policy, the government can also stabilize the economy by changing its spending and tax policy. Bakit? Kasi nga, dahil nga sa central bank is yung ini-influence niya through its monetary policy, sa paniniwalang ito, sa teoryang ito, may impluwensyahan din ng gobyerno ang spending. May impluwensyahan din ng gobyerno ang consumer spending. Paano? Di babaan mo yung buwis. Pag binabaan mo yung buwis ng tao, mas marami siyang perang magagastos. Pag tinaasan mo naman ang buwis ng tao, less ang perang magagastos niya. Di ba? Kaya yun, yung nag-e-evolve na yun sa teorya na yun, no, na bukod sa central bank, sila rin sa government is kaya nilang influensyahan ang law of supply and demand. The goal here is simple. Let's say we are experiencing recession. The government will lower the taxes to increase the demand and fuel economic growth. That is called expansionary fiscal policy. Ngayon, pag recession ang ginagawa ng central bank, pinababaan ng interest rate to attract borrowing and spending para mag-start uli, mag-kick out uli economy. Ang ginagawa naman ng gobyerno in tandem with monetary policy, it lowered the taxes. Kasi by lowering the taxes sa mga kumpanya, the company may attract, no? Dahil mas marami ang kikitain, mas maraming pera na magagamit ang company to capitalize for their expansion. Binawasan yung tax nila eh. They can use that, yung natapyas na tax nila, they can use that money for their expansion. Inversely sa pareho naman sa tao. Pag binawasan mo ang taxes ng tao, pag binawasan mo ang tax na binabayaran niya, nagkakaroon din ng tinatawag na spending. Kasi yung perang hindi niya ginagasto, napupunta sa buwis niya, ipupunta niya sa consumer spending o mag-a-add doon sa spending. And that is called the expansionary fiscal policy. Ngayon naman, if people are paying lower taxes, they have more money to spend and invest, which fuels for the higher demand. That demand will translate to more firms having new workers. Ayan na. Sumunod. The government might decide to increase spending by building more highways, roads, bridges, and it could increase employment, pushing up demand and growth. Diba? The government, no, it can decide its infrastructure project, thus boosting the economy because it will hire workers and more people will have more jobs. Naintindihan ba? Okay. Expansionary fiscal policy is usually tend to have a deficit when government expenditure exceeds earnings from taxes. Tama yun. Ngayon, when economy picks up, rising of wages lead to inflation and asset bubbles begin to form. The government might propose austerity measures. That means the budget cut, a contractionary fiscal policy such forcing a brief recession in order to let the market correct itself. They need to repay the debt induced by expanding economy. Ngayon, masasabi nyo parang malabo. Hindi. Ganito rin yun. Ang monetary policy, gumagamit sila ng expansionary tools at contractionary tools. Ganon din sa fiscal policy. Meron din silang expansionary tools, babaan yung taxes, mag-spend tayo gumamit tayo, mag-induce tayo ng government spending para magkaroon ng trabaho yung mga tao. At meron din silang contractionary policy. Pag sinabing austerity measures, that means magkakat ng spending ang gobyerno. Pag nag-cut ng spending ng gobyerno, that means pinipigilan nito nire-restrict nito yung growth kasi asset bubble is forming. A bubble in the economy is forming. In order to make the economy sustainable, nire-restrict niya yung growth until maabot uli ng market yung optimal level niya o yung optimal price niya. Yung tamang value niya. Naintindihan ba? Ayan yung mga naintindihan. Okay. Kagaya nito sa central bank, no? Sa tool, yung mga tools na ginagamit ng central bank, sa monetary policy, gamit nila interest rates. Ang tool naman ng government to influence that, kagaya ng anong katumbas ng interest rates? Tax and government spending. Ngayon, ano yung epekto nun? Sa central bank, yung interest rate, ang epekto nun yung cost of borrowing. Kasi higher interest rate make more expensive borrowing and lower interest rate makes borrowing cheap. Ano naman ang epekto noong tax and government spending, no? Pag ni-reduce, sabihin natin ni-reduce ng government, ang kalalabasan naman nun is budget deficit. Di ba? Kaya ngayon, sa distribution naman yan, higher rate hit, matatamaan ng mataas na interest rate yung mga homeowners, pati nagbabayad ng utang. Ngayon naman, ang tatamaan naman, pag nagtaas naman ng government ng taxes, ang tatamaan naman nun, depende kung sino tinaasan niya ng buwis. Kung ang tinaasan niya yung consumer o yung basic commodities, lahat tayo tatamaan. Exchange rate, yung currency appreciation, parehong tatamaan yan. Sa supply side, yung limited impact lang naman sa supply side dyan, pero higher taxes affect workers. Sa taxes naman, pag ginamit ng gobyerno yung kanyang contractionary fiscal policy, tatamaan naman dyan yung higher taxes, ang tatamaan yan yung mga worker o tayong mga consumer mismo. Naintindihan ba? Okay, siguro naman na intindihan natin to, no, yung monetary policy at fiscal policy. Pasensya na, inaantok na rin ako. Okay, sana onti lang daw, matatapos na tayo dito sa fundamental analysis. At sa susunod natin, yung pag-a-analyze na natin sa central bank.